We're live.
All right. Okay, everyone. Welcome to episode 19. Happy New Year. You got me, Jay. We have Brad, Chad, but we have two special guests with us today. We got Luke and Jason. Um, these guys have been in the MMA game for a while. Also fans and also compete as well. They can get into a little bit about what they do, and then we can start hitting these topics.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us on the Puncher's Chance podcast. Super excited to talk about the 2020 end of the year wrap up. Been a great year for MMA despite all the challenges. My name's Luke Staley. I'm a professional MMA featherweight and purple belt in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. You can follow my Instagram at Luke Wayne Staley. We do not yet have a YouTube channel for our podcast, but it'll be coming hopefully within the next week or two. And follow me and Jason on social media at Luke Staley on Facebook or at Luke Wayne Staley on Instagram, and watch our podcast go from the ground up. And super excited to be on with you today. Jason, you.
Yeah, I'm Jason. I'm a amateur MMA fighter and soon to be amateur kickboxer here in the next couple weeks. Competed in a bunch of jiu-jitsu tournaments, bunch of wrestling tournaments. I'm a blue belt under Zach Davis up here in Frederick, Maryland. And yeah, just keep on following. Watch me and Luke talk crap about MMA. It's great.
All right. Well, welcome you guys. Welcome, guys. So, topics. Since we spoke earlier and we spoke with Chad, sounds like Chad was the one that initiated this. KO of the year. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
Chad, I want to hear you go first because you're the one who wanted to do this topic first. I heard a little birdie told me you have someone other than Joaquin Buckley as your KO of the year. That's total blasphemy, but I'm interested to see what you have to say.
I can put them in the same category because they're both just as creative. But Kevin Holland having the understanding to, on his back, kick up for momentum and land a punch clean on Jacare Souza to knock him out, I think is more impressive than Joaquin Buckley, who was losing that fight. Just saying, hey, you grab my leg, I'm going to throw a kick. Because that goes wrong so many ways if he does not land that kick.
I think the fact that it could have gone wrong so many ways is even more speaking to how impressive it is that it went right. I mean,
Yep.
Joaquin Buckley, I think that knockout is a victim of its own greatness. I mean, it's been replayed so many times, not just the UFC, but Kanye
Right.
West tweeting it out, ESPN, Sports Center top plays. I mean, you're seeing it everywhere, and it's almost becoming mind-numbing. You see the Joaquin Buckley knockout, we've seen it all 100 times or more.
Yes.
But I'll be darned if when we talk about the KO of the century, that won't be right up in there in the top five. Don't get me wrong, Kevin Holland's knockout was extremely impressive. But I think the whereabouts for Joaquin Buckley in that split second to have his foot caught, spin for such an audacious flying back heel technique, and landing perfectly on the button. I mean, Kevin Holland, impressive knockout, but needed one or two punches to follow up on Jacare before he got pushed off by the ref. Joaquin Buckley's in his corner celebrating as Impa Kasanganay is falling to the ground. So for me, although Holland is a respectable KO, it's got to be none other than Joaquin Buckley, in my opinion, for KO
The
of the year.
reason why I edge it out for Kevin Holland, because we learned more about Kevin Holland from that knockout than we did from Joaquin Buckley. Because right
I
at
agree.
that moment, you got Jacare Souza on top of you.
Right.
This is jiu-jitsu royalty. This is very dangerous situation. And to say, hey, I am so comfortable in my bottom ground game that I know how to pin you up and take a shot and throw a punch like that, which once again, if you miss, you're in a lot of trouble, especially against a guy like Jacare Souza. And to land that and then be able to mount on top of him as he's falling back and finish that KO.
That's true.
We saw Kevin Holland as a potential belt holder in the UFC at that moment. Whereas Joaquin Buckley, like, hey, you had an opportunity. It was a lucky shot. It looked spectacular. But I think it's just more of, hey, I got my foot caught. I'm desperate. Let me spin.
That's
James, Brad, Jason, what do you guys think?
A potential belt holder?
Yeah, that was ooh.
You got too much dip in your chip with that,
That
one.
was my gosh.
I think Kevin Holland could give Israel a run for his money.
Next year, yeah, but not now.
And
No,
we'll see.
Just yet. But I'm looking forward to it.
He needs more time.
I'm going to have to go with Kevin Holland as my pick. Jacare is definitely dangerous. Joaquin kick was absolutely amazing, but now I go back to the base level. Like Chad said, these are higher level guys, and it's a lot harder to get away with that in the higher levels versus being at the lower levels. Granted, everyone's a threat when you're in the UFC and in our promotion in general, but there is a clear distance,
Yeah.
between them versus Kevin Holland, and so forth. So
Hey,
that's what-
Impa Sung and I go into that fight undefeated, 8-0. I think 2 first-round knockouts in the UFC. No slouch himself. Certainly
And was
not the
winning that
accolades-
fight
he was winning
up to
He
that
was
point.
definitely winning
Yeah.
that fight.
certainly not the accolades of Jacare, but
Right.
tough to call Impa Sung and I a lower level of competition. I think Joaquin Buckley's kick was possibly the knockout of the decade, if not the knockout of the century. Brad and Jason, your thoughts?
Wow. Huh. Um,
The deep
I
thought.
hate to do it. I hate to do this to you, Luke. I really do.
Come on, the board.
And I was
Come
with you
to
at first. I was with you at first, but I'm going with Kevin Holland. I mean, you got to think about it. Given the situation, like Chad said, not only was he on his back, but he was actually even talking to him during the fight, saying, "Hey, that's good," and like KO him.
He
Like,
told Jacare
like, he
Souza
was
to
kinda
pick
like-
his booger out of
it
his
was
nose
crazy.
before he punched him. He told Jacare Souza to pick his booger out of his nose before he punched him.
He did. You're right.
You don't see that often. You don't see that at all, actually. So
You do. Khabib talks a lot.
it's different, though. It's different. We're not talking about Khabib right now. All right, we're not
We might talk about him later, but right now, it seems like
So
it's Buckley.
I also have Kevin Holland knocking out Jacare as my knockout of the year.
Oh man!
But for a completely different reason. So, if you take a heel in 90% of your face, you're gonna get knocked out. If you take a punch to the forehead, 9.5 times out of 10, you're not gonna get knocked out.
Right.
Right.
You're supposed to take punches off the forehead if you're gonna take punches.
Right.
Let alone while somebody's on their back and you're a multi-time jiu-jitsu world champion. Kevin Holland reached up, punched Jacare in the forehead, and knocked him out. You
Yeah.
don't see forehead punches knock people out on the feet, let alone off somebody's back. That was amazing.
It's true.
Now he did kick up for momentum. That's a subtle
He
thing.
did,
But
he did. But do you know how hard you have to hit somebody in the forehead to do that to him?
Exactly.
That's fair.
Exactly.
One more defense for Joaquin Buckley. Certainly Kevin Holland's not a bad pick. I think Daniel Cormier picked Kevin Holland as his knockout of the year. So both of them are in high quality for what we want to see in a knockout of the year. I think for me personally, the reason I go Buckley is a little better than Holland is things that I look for a KO of the year is difficulty of technique and the cleanness of the knockout. I think the technique of Kevin Holland having to jump and spin was a little more technically difficult. And as I stated earlier, Holland did follow up with a couple punches before the referee pushed him off, where if I'm looking for a clean KO, Buckley's was a little bit more of the walk-off quality. But, 4-1 in favor of Holland. Can't argue that it's a great knockout. I just think for me, Buckley's is elevated just a little bit above what put my jaw on the floor when I saw KO of the year. But
Okay,
great
like this.
conversation nonetheless.
Before we step on to another topic,
Yeah.
are there any honorable mentions? I think there's a few. I think
Well,
Cody
yeah, the
Garbrandt-
Buckley knockout.
well, yeah.
Okay.
Garbrandt's knockout.
Yes.
Oh yeah, that was good.
Yes.
That
That's
was
what I
good.
wanted
That was
to say.
Really good.
Yeah.
Sugar Sean O'Malley in the same card, also beautiful.
Yes.
one
Yes.
for KO.
Yep.
Eddie Wyland, that was decent.
Okay.
But other than that, I think, yeah.
Chaos
Check.
Williams, one punch
Oh,
KO.
yeah, against
Over-
Al-Hassan. Yeah.
Yeah,
was good. That was
Abdul
good.
Razak Al Hassan. But I think for the most part, Holland's and Buckley's were the ones that I've seen, and in my personal opinion, who are right there at the top. Total blasphemy, total robbery that Buckley isn't the best KO of the year for some of you guys. But I rest my
Total
I rest
robbery.
my case.
No. Okay. All right. So our next topic is comeback. So I started off with Chad. I'm gonna go with you this time, Luke. What is your comeback fighter?
Yeah, so this can be sort of broken into two categories: career comeback of the year or in-fight comeback of the year.
Right.
I personally went with an in-fight comeback of the year. Honorable mention to Chase Hooper and Daniel Rodriguez, but for me, the in-fight comeback of the year was good old Alistair Overeem versus our boy Walt Harris. Poor Alistair had
Oh
to beat
shoot,
that
yeah.
guy. Everyone's rooting for Walt Harris to come back, but if we're just talking about skill to skill, Alistair Overeem could have potentially been stopped in that fight. Some people thought the ref should have jumped in when Harris had Alistair hurt so bad. Overeem came back, kept his composure, landed a beautiful head kick and finished with TKO ground and pound. Now, there are a couple of fights that I think could give this one a run for its money in competition for comeback of the year. Certainly some great comebacks that we saw. But I think for Overeem, a fighter who we said maybe he struggles a little bit with his chin having been cracked in the past, able to keep his composure, come back, finish the fight against the top heavyweight in Harris. That's my personal pick for comeback of the year.
Okay. Okay. All right. How about you, Jason? What you got?
So I got a career comeback, and I got Bobby Green. I know he ended the year on a loss, but when this quarantine started, Bobby Green was on a tear. He came out in June. He tried to get on the card in May, but that was like the first COVID card, and things were kind of difficult. He got on there in June against Clay Guida, completely dominated Clay Guida. Then went on to the Lando Venata rematch where he outclassed Lando Venata, beat the brakes off Alan Patrick. He did have a loss to Thiago Moises, but before this year started, Bobby Green's job was realistically on the line. He was on a 2-fight skid. If he would have lost to Clay Guida, he'd have been out the door. And now he's right back in the mix of things at the toughest weight class in the sport at 155.
It's a good pick.
That's a good pick. That's a good pick. All right.
Mine, I would have to say, is Mackenzie Dern. Mackenzie Dern had a tough loss to Amanda Hebus, who is on her way, okay? And she is no slouch in herself. Took that loss kind of hard, then found out immediately after that she was pregnant, had her child, came back, and now she's 3-0 ever since, and she is performing at a high level.
Makes sense.
At a extremely high level. And I think we've always talked about with the women, Michelle Waterson always wanted that title, being the first mother champion in the UFC. And I think Mackenzie Dern is one of those people that's very capable of that.
Okay. All right. I like that. Okay. Brad, what you got?
My comeback fighter, I'm going to say Charles Oliveira.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you why. I truly believe that no one ever talked about him before this fight with Tony Ferguson.
Mm-hmm.
Jay and I used to always talk about Charles Oliveira. I always said that this man is the one person I think can take down Khabib because his jiu-jitsu is just so nice. What he did to Tony Ferguson, he put on a clinic. And I think that kind of solidified that he's definitely a contender and he's definitely worthy to be champion in that division.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a question about that, Brad?
Yes.
What exactly did he come back from? He hasn't lost a fight in 2 years.
I get that. What he came back from is being a known fighter. His name kind of died out because in that top 5 in the lightweight division, you always only talked about the top 5. You didn't talk about anyone else.
That's true.
I agree with that. I think that's largely due in part. It's the same way between him and Max Holloway is where they grew up in the UFC.
Yeah.
I mean, both of those guys were in the UFC at 19, 20 years old. And you got Charles Oliveira at 28 now.
Yeah. Like for the longest time, like Oliveira, he was like always like, I think ranked 7, ranked 6.
Yeah.
But no one ever talked about him because of that. Because you have Dustin Poirier, you have Tony Ferguson, you have Justin Gaethje, you have Khabib, you have Conor McGregor. So when you think of those people, you're not thinking of anyone else within that, the other 6 to 10 of the lightweight division.
Makes sense.
Man, I guess it all depends. Certainly, I don't think we do any arguments, Brad, against Charles Oliveira having a breakout year. Probably the biggest breakout year of Charles Oliveira's career. But if we're talking about comeback fight of the year, I think he's won something like 8 in a row, 10 in a row at this point. definitely under the radar of maybe a mainstream fans, but for the hardcores, Charles Oliveira has been a dark horse in this division for a couple years. Definitely a great year for him and a breakout performance against Tony Ferguson. But with also a submission win over Kevin Lee right before that, breaking the UFC submission record, I think last year with 14 submissions he has now in the UFC.
Yeah,
I don't
the most
necessarily
submissions in
think
UFC.
comeback fighter of the year is necessarily where I'd put him, but certainly a unique pick and always good to have a good diversity of opinion when we're talking about that. If we're talking about career comeback of the year, I tend maybe to lean towards a little bit more of a Mackenzie Dern or a Bobby Green, but definitely no arguments here that Charles Oliveira didn't have a great year in general.
Even not so much also with comeback, kinda, that's a loose word, but even Kevin Holland, technically, a comeback in his career.
Yeah,
being in the right weight class makes a whole lot of difference, for the most part.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I agree with all of those. Charles Oliveira is more in the lines of when we talk about, I guess, if you want to throw him in a breakout fighter, I think the fight against Tony Ferguson is pretty much of a breakout.
Maybe most improved fight of the year, but don't call it a comeback. Oliveira's been here for years.
I'm sorry. Oh my god.
Yo, all right. I knew that was coming.
I didn't do
that. All right, so y'all ready for my pick? Y'all ready for
this?
Yeah. Masvidal. No one spoke about him. The only person that spoke about him really before this as a dark horse is that man, Chad. I will give him credit for that. But before this year, no one really cared too much. No one gave him any type of respect. He went on to be on a UFC cover, ended up being one of the hardest hitters in MMA, apparently by some people. And he actually fought for a belt. Like that. That's a massive jump.
Yeah, but he lost.
He lost.
Yeah, he did.
He lost. Definitely lost.
But definitely a massive comeback for as big of as a journeyman as he has been.
Yeah,
I disagree.
That's true.
You can't agree.
I mean, he's always been talented. I'm not taking away from his talent, but he's always been very streaky up and down his career. And I think, the end of last year coming into this year is just, that's all we talked about.
Sort of what I wanted to touch on. A lot of the accolades that you're giving to Masvidal, cover of UFC, the new UFC game, increased popularity, even the title shot.
Yeah.
All of that was built off of what he did in 2019. Although you saw a lot more success and fame realized in 2020, Masvidal only fought one time in 2020, and it was a loss.
Exactly.
Although I agree popularity-wise in 2020, he might be bigger than he ever was. To say that he's the comeback fighter of the year in 2020 when most of those accolades were earned in 2019, I would have to maybe lean towards someone a little more like Dern or Green for comeback fighter of the year.
No, that's fair. But also in hindsight, we really got to think about it too, which is another big thing about it is everyone that you all have said still was in contention. Looking at hindsight now, Dana White was ready to cut a lot of people. He only fought once, like you said, so that was that. If he didn't make it this year and we went to the year where he was cutting people, we may not be looking at Jorge.
But again, I think a lot of that was
get cut.
Earned in 2019, more than 2020. I don't think you can give a fighter who went 0-1 on the year as comeback fighter of the year. Certainly a career resurgence, but most of that built off what he'd done the year prior and fame being realized at the title shot this year. Most of it, I think, 2019 was his biggest body of work.
I mean, that's fair. I'm good. I can definitely acknowledge I'm going for more career. I'm definitely going for more career than this one. I'm not going for exactly like fighting records and stuff like that. I mean, you all guys already pretty much touched on that, and I kind of actually want to be different. But yeah, as far as career wise, like Jorge was he may be still fighting in Miami somewhere.
It's an interesting pick. Jason, do you have anything to say on Jorge Masvidal? The comeback fight of the year for 2020 might be the only analyst who picks him as the comeback fight of the year for 2020, but interesting to hear.
Yeah, I got something to say on that. I don't want to hear you say a damn thing about me saying Shogun's going to win a world title anymore after that pick. I don't want to hear nothing, Luke.
That's more of a stretch. That's more of a stretch to me. That's more of a stretch.
Oh my God, no.
What?
Shogun's won fights. Shogun's won fights.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll see how this play out. This is definitely more so an offline topic. We can have this discussion. We can definitely have this discussion. Okay, so that's all. So that is all our comeback. So now we're going upset.
Yeah, very interesting picks. Yeah, upset of the year.
Okay, so upset of the year. What you all think? You know what? Let's start with Brad. Let's see that look on your face. Go ahead. I wanted to see if you're gonna say the same thing I'm gonna say.
You already knew what I'm gonna say.
Go ahead. Tell us.
Tyron Woodley.
Is that upset as in like upset or like we're upset?
Right.
Like we're upset. You know what?
All right. I think I got a little too emotional right there.
Yeah, I was gonna say not you upset.
All
Like
right,
they
the
were
biggest
upset.
The biggest upset, I would probably say the Max Holloway and Alexander Volkanovski.
You got it wrong again. I'm gonna stop you right there. I'm sorry. I'm gonna hand you this shovel. We're gonna collectively bury Tony Ferguson together. That's what we're gonna do.
No.
We're not burying Tony Ferguson.
No.
Gaethje wasn't an upset. Gaethje wasn't an upset. Charles Oliveira is not an upset.
Yeah.
They were both upsets.
Listen, we dug half the grave with Justin Gaethje, and then we dug the rest when we got to Charles Oliveira. Tony Ferguson's done, bro.
I said he was done last episode.
Yeah, so bury him. Come on.
But it's not an upset though. Like it's not the biggest upset. It's not the biggest upset to me. Like this is all of our own opinions on what's the biggest upset.
I got you.
Okay.
I just don't see the upset in that. Who'd you say again?
The Max Holloway fight.
I don't see that as an upset as more as it was, technically a robbery. Like we all saw the same thing.
No, I mean, I guess maybe it was interpreted a little bit differently. Where we have a comeback of the year, for example, we broke into in-fight comeback versus career comeback, and upset of the year. I was thinking is who had the biggest upset as far as the betting odds, and you guys picked fighters who upset you the most. Definitely Tony Ferguson and Tyron Woodley. If we are interpreting upset like that. Had big drop-offs. I took it as betting underdog of the year, and I picked Shayna Dobson versus Maria Agapova as the biggest betting underdog of the year. I think the biggest reason I picked Dobson versus Agapova, although there were a couple of good ones, shout out to Juicy J, Julian Arosa, for knocking off undefeated Woodson. Shayna Dobson had a losing record in the UFC, and Agapova was 11-1, 11-0 at that time. This fight was so clearly set up to be a feeder fight for Agapova to go in, beat the brakes off of Dobson. Dobson gets jetted from the UFC, and Agapova goes on to be built up as more of a star. I think she was a plus 1,200 favorite over Shayna Dobson, which for those of you who know how the betting odds works, that means in order to win $100 on Agapova, you would have had to put up $1,200. Dobson was somewhere around a $600 underdog, meaning if you put up $100, you would have won $600. Dobson's career was on the line. No one was giving her a chance. And this wasn't a robbery by any sense of the word. She went in and finished the fight. Although I've heard Holloway versus Volkanovski thrown out in the upset of the year. Although I believe Holloway won that fight and it might be considered robbery of the year. As far as how those fighters match up altogether, I wouldn't have been super surprised if it was Holloway or Volkanovski, both very close in skill level. I don't know if I'd consider that necessarily an upset. Whereas Dobson and Agapova, my jaw was on the floor. Dobson beating the brakes off Agapova. Mark Smith pushes her off. She's going up to the camera, beating her chest, going, roof, roof, underdog. Got my adrenaline pumping, made me want to, get in the cage and fight some myself, And that's the thing I love about mixed martial arts, why I picked Dobson versus Agapova as my upset of the year, is because unlike other sports where, the referees can come in and rob, boxing notoriously corrupt. Mixed martial arts is such a beautiful atmosphere where if you go in and get a finish, it doesn't matter how much the odds are stacked against you. You can go in and seize the moment, and that's exactly what Shayna Dobson did. So Dobson versus Agapova for my statistical upset of the year. You brought in Woodley and Ferguson as far as like your disappointment of the year. And if we're going on that kind of view of the word upset of the year, I think I would also have to go with Tyron Woodley as my drop off of the year. Hardly have I ever seen a champion go from such heights. We were talking about Woodley as maybe one of the best welterweights of all time to 0-1 or 0-2 on the year. Really disappointed to see. But my upset of the year for fight would be Agapova versus Dobson.
Fair.
For sure. If you haven't seen it, log on to your UFC Fight Pass. You got to watch that rerun.
Can I throw in a fake upset of the year?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. On this, what everybody thought was an upset but wasn't. Jan Blachowicz versus Dominic Reyes.
Woo!
A lot of people.
I thought that was an upset.
If not an upset at all.
Hold on. If I remember correctly, Chad, you and Jay both said that Dominic Reyes was going to win that fight.
I didn't, but okay.
I was the only person that did that. Your memory is absolutely incorrect.
I don't know about that.
Your memory is absolutely incorrect. I was the only person.
I'm gonna retrace that. No.
Okay. We'll talk about.
You know that we bet on that, right? And you sent me money for that one. Did you forget?
I didn't. I couldn't have.
Okay. Look at James' face.
I don't recall.
Okay.
Jason,
People thought it was an upset was because they thought that his performance against John Jones was just so spectacular. Technically, not really. I would think that was one of John Jones' more poor performances in his career.
We're still going to take away from being spectacular.
It doesn't take away from it, but it gave the illusion that Dominic Reyes was somehow on the same plane as John Jones. And I wanted people very clearly, and I said in our podcast back then, I don't want people to think Dominic Reyes is ever on John Jones' playing field just because of this fight. And Jan Blachowicz came in and proved that exactly. Because Dominic Reyes looked like a shell of himself.
Yeah,
he did.
Definitely did.
He did.
Took that one power shot to the rib. I said, well, my pick is wrong.
The fight was over after that.
Yeah, so he took that power shot to the rib. It was over. I was like, that one.
Oh, you know what? You are right, Chad. You are right.
Jason, James, who you guys got for upset of the year? Interested to hear your picks.
So I actually have Macy Barber losing to Roxanne Modafferi very first card of the year.
That was in the beginning.
Modafferi was a plus 650 underdog, tied with Shayna Dobson for biggest. It depended on the book you went to. Anyway, Modafferi was supposed to get absolutely worked. This was the main event of the prelims on McGregor versus Cerrone. Their plan was to have Macy Barber come out on ESPN and blow the brakes off of Modafferi and send Modafferi back to Vegas crying and disheveled. But Modafferi said, very cool, hold these overhands, also I can grapple. And she beat the brakes off Macy Barber, tore her ACL, and I believe, let me look it up right here, it was a unanimous decision, but I believe it should have been stopped in the third round because Macy Barber was just not there.
Right. Yeah, that's a great pick. Honestly, that was my first choice, even though as we discussed on our podcast one time, me and Roxanne Modafferi have a little bit of Instagram beef. Not my favorite personality as a fighter, but she was my original pick for upset of the year simply because of what you said so clearly. She was being brought in to lose, and the hype train that was Macy Barber was, I think, a little bit bigger than the hype train for Agapova. I mean, everyone thought Macy Barber was going to be the youngest champion, take John Jones' record as being the youngest UFC champion in the history of the promotion.
Absolutely, yes.
Total blasphemy. The reason that I decided not to go with that, although that was my initial pick, was because unlike Shayna Dobson, Modafferi had shown in the past that she was at least a competent fighter. You look at Shayna Dobson, 5-6 in the UFC, whereas you look at Modafferi, definitely a heavy underdog and a fighter that was clearly brought in by the promotion to lose to Macy Barber. She had over 30 fights and a pretty good winning record, including some pretty impressive victories in the UFC prior to that. So it wasn't totally out of the picture to see how her experience and her veteran skills were able to take over against the young fighter, whereas Dobson versus Agapova looked like it was going to be a blowout even more than I thought Modafferi versus Barber. But that was my original pick and a pretty big upset of the year. I would say that's a close second.
Close second. Okay, so now we're still diversifying on this topic as well.
Yeah,
because
it could be first. I don't know. I want to hear what James has to say.
It could, like very much so. I mean, You kind of proved good points. She did have what? You said 30 fights?
Yeah, close to
Mata
that.
Berry,
Yeah.
yeah, she
Okay.
had like 28, something like that. If you want to argue semantics,
Right. Okay. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And
All
no
right.
discussion from brain damage. No, just kidding.
You don't. We don't figure those things out till later. My pick is going to be kind of subtle, very simple. O'Malley versus Vera.
Oh
That's
my
fair.
God. How did I forget
That's a good
that?
fair.
upset of the year.
don't
How
have the
did I
numbers.
forget that?
I don't have the numbers exactly because I do gamble, so I know about the point spreads, underdogs, overdogs, even just betting in rounds essentially. And I completely got blown out the water with that one. I honestly didn't see it. O'Malley is very talented. He was definitely already kind of UFC stardom, but we was trying to get him out that 15, 12 range and jump him into a higher, maybe close to the single digits, and that kind of screwed him. I'm not exactly sure if I want to give it. I don't know if I want to give it the very kick to to his inside and to outside that knee where he starts to break down after that, or maybe something he tweaked himself. But yeah, that's my biggest upset of the year.
Yeah, that's a great pick. I mean, if we talk about Macy Barber being a high hype train, O'Malley,
Yeah.
even more than Barber, was supposed to be the next, coming of UFC Jesus. I think a lot of the hardcores, saw that Vera had a chance, but you're right, good upset and definitely a high profile one.
Yep.
Not the way I saw the fight going down, so can't argue with that pick. I think you and Jason both proved good points on the upset of the year.
Yeah.
Um, but I still think it's Dobson versus Akapov simply because of the skill disparity between the two, seemingly. But really good picks for upset of the year between you guys. So,
That makes
you'll
sense.
hear no argument.
That makes sense. Now, oh man. So what? Breakout fighter? Is that what's going on?
Breakout
believe
fight
so.
of the year.
Okay. So let's go with Jason first. Let's go ahead and run that.
I got Kevin Holland, man. What was it? 4 fights this year, 4-0. Knocking out
5.
Joaquin Buckley. 5 fights this year, 5-0. Knocking out Joaquin Buckley, knocking out Jacare off his back. The man's an absolute killer. I love watching him fight. I don't know if he's going to be a belt holder, but regardless of what happens with the middleweight division, now that we know for sure the champ's going up, he's definitely going to fight for the belt. I don't think he beats Stylebender, but who knows?
Yeah,
I
The
think
reason-
breakout fighter of the year, definitely Kevin Holland.
The reason why I say potential belt holder is because I think Stylebender's giving up his belt. I think he's gonna go and he's gonna sit in light heavyweight. He's gonna sit in light heavyweight until John comes back down.
Interesting. I could see it happening.
Yeah.
That's an interesting hot take, but totally within the realm of possibility.
Yeah, and if we
Yeah.
look at that and we look at Kevin Holland compared to the rest of the middleweight, so let's take Stylebender out of the equation. Where do we now put Kevin Holland
That's an
and
exciting
belt
division.
potential?
That's an exciting division.
Kevin Holland versus Robert Whitaker is a tough out for Holland, my friend.
It is.
Yeah.
I think so
It is.
too.
But I think Holland has all the tools and technique to put away Robert Whitaker.
Ooh.
Brad,
I don't
was
know.
Holland your breakout fighter of the year as well?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't really
Chad,
have
is
too
you
many
as
quarrels
well?
on that either. So
Yeah, I would say either Holland. There's some guys that are close if you technically want to call them breakout, because I mean we could say the same thing about Figueiredo.
yep, that was also like I
Yeah.
wanted to.
Yeah.
talk
We did talk about
Yeah,
this.
it's
We
one and
definitely talked
two,
about
for
this. You're
sure.
right.
Yeah, Figueiredo has a belt. That's probably the only as far
Yeah.
as an argument against Kevin. That's the only thing I can give him. Me, Chad, and Brad have discussed this plenty of times before. I feel like there's not really a wrong answer between the two, just because the belt. But when going back and looking at it, if you take away the belt, even though he dominated people in a crazy fashion, then that last fight he had was absolutely
Oh,
exciting.
war.
Oh my gosh, absolute war. I could see that being kind of the breakout fight of the year. But Kevin Holland's kind of dominated.
Yeah,
Male,
it's
Yeah. So
With all 5 fights.
yeah.
if we're looking at what the categories are, I mean, I think I would pick Figueiredo for fighter of the year over Holland.
right.
But for breakout fighter of the year, if we're talking about what each category means, I
Yeah.
think there are more people who know Kevin Holland's name that didn't before than that know who Figueiredo is who didn't know before. But
Right.
going off of that description for the category, my pick for breakout fighter of the year is Kazmat Shemaev. I think there were less people who knew who Kazmat was at the start of 2020 than did know Kevin Holland. I mean, Kevin Holland may be a better body of work if we're talking about who we pick for Fighter of the Year, but if we're talking about a name that no one had any idea who it was. I mean, Kazmat Shemaev at the beginning of 2020, I would have said, who do you mean? You know, Habib Nurmagomedov? Well, you have a brain aneurysm with Kazmat who? But if you talk about stardom, I mean, Kazmat Shemaev, over 1 million followers on his Instagram now. Everybody knows who he is. Is he a title contender as proven as Kevin Holland? Definitely not. Is he the breakout fighter of the year? The fighter that rose to the most stardom from the most category of the unknown, the darkest depths of the regional circuits? I think so. I think for breakout fight of the year, you got to give it to Kazmat, even though I don't want that to be mistaken for the fact that he had a better year than Holland. I think he's the most breakout star of 2020.
Yeah. So now we're going career based, essentially, is what you're aiming for. Okay, that's kind of been a theme today anyway, because like you said, they're kind of like subcategories.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so we got
I would agree with you, Luke. If Shemaev would have taken the fight against Neil Magny.
Yes, I'm about
If,
to say.
if they would have made that happen and Shemaev ices Magny, I don't think anybody has an argument against Shemaev at that
Exactly.
point.
That's absolutely fair.
Yeah.
But he did only fight twice this year. I know it was
Three
twice
times.
in 2 weeks.
3 times.
Was it 3?
Yeah, he knocked out
3
Gerald
times,
Misha in
twice
5
in 2
seconds.
weeks. Yeah. That wasn't a fight. That was an ass whooping. There's a
I've
difference.
gotta give the edge to Kevin Holland only because he kind of told Chimaev, "Hey, look, if your fight falls through, I'll fight you before the end of the year.
Ooh, good
I will
point.
fight
Good
you
point.
before the end of the year."
Yep.
So I
And Jamal
I
say
don't know.
anything about that? Because he usually goes at people, but I haven't heard him say anything about Kevin Holland.
Kevin Holland just got COVID, so he's out for a while.
yeah.
I mean, that's fair.
Or
But
not Kevin Holland, Chimaev just
Chimaev,
got
that's
COVID.
fair.
He might have got COVID, yeah.
I mean,
Supposed to
okay.
fight Leon Edwards in a week or two, but
Yep.
unfortunately that fight fell through.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dang. That was pretty quick. Okay. That's
that
pretty
was
much
easy.
yeah.
Can we make like a subcategory of like breakout and just who fighters that we think are this year allowed them to prove that they're going to be in the next generation of stars?
Yeah,
yeah.
I love
Yeah.
that.
Okay.
Okay.
And for me, that's Michelle Pereira. Yeah. However you say it.
You say his name right.
Yeah. I think he this year with the way he fights is like it's Showtime 2.0.
Yeah.
And I think he's going to be an exciting fighter to watch come 2021.
Okay.
If I'm going to go with future rising stars, Miranda Maverick looked fantastic in a UFC debut,
Yep.
but only one fight.
Right.
Nonetheless, an amazing promotional debut. Shout out to Miranda Maverick. Jimmy Crute, who's been grinding at it for years, really had a breakout year under the age of 23. And also a shout out to Brian Boone Kelleher, a name that not a lot of fans knew before the year started. More fans know now, and I think someone who even more fans will know in 2021. 3-0 in the year, 3 finishes, 3 performance bonuses. Kelleher really shined throughout the quarantine era of fights. Putting in a couple good back-to-back performances, someone who I'm excited to see in the future. And also a shout-out to Billy Quarantillo as well. Lost his most recent fight against, name slipped me at the time. Gavin Tucker. Lost most recently against Gavin Tucker. But 3-0 before that in the UFC and 2-0 in the year. Quarantillo is another fighter who I think that a lot of people in the featherweight division are gonna hear his name next year.
Okay. Brad, Jason.
If we're going next generation of stars, I'm gonna get called a little bit of a homer here for a second. I'm gonna say Tafan Njukwe just made his UFC debut, didn't knock a man into orbit, went down to middleweight, completely dominated. Before that, he was on the Contender Series, absolutely nuked this guy with a head kick. Also, next generation, got to give a shout out to the local Frederick man, Matt Summelsberger, making his UFC debut this year. Just put on an absolute striking clinic, threw in a takedown in the 3rd round just to say F you, I can. Great fight against Carlton Minus. So that's definitely a guy to look out for. And then if we're just going MMA as a whole, it's hard for me to not look over to Bellator and look at AJ McKee. Man has
Yeah.
been running a
AJ,
train
yeah.
in the featherweight Grand Prix, and I think he's gonna beat the brakes off of Pitbull in the finals, whenever that is this year. I don't know why they don't set dates; they just set matchups. But
We
Bellator does Bellator things. But yeah, I think AJ McKee is a force to be reckoned with.
I think with just on that note, like going to other promotions, I think we saw the birth of Ronda Rousey 2.0 and Kayla Harrison.
Kayla Harrison, yeah,
Because she's gonna have a run there.
yeah,
'Cause I
she's gonna
don't
go
think
crazy in PFL.
Yeah, because there's nobody in PFL that I think is strong enough to deal with her.
No,
And it's just she's an Olympic level judo, and you're just not gonna stop that.
Makes sense. Okay.
And
I wish.
unless they get world class kickboxers, especially on the women's side, because that's usually the only counter to that. And she's just way too strong. I'm sorry. I was trying to find a way out of it, but it's not. I'm sorry. Kayla
You
Harrison.
know who I'd like to see her fight? I'd like to see her fight either Jarena Bars if she's still around or Kat Zingano.
Yeah.
I think those would be two great
like Kat a
tests
little
for
better. I like Kat a little
Kayla.
better. I like Kat a little better. Yeah. Okay.
Cat, a natural 135er. Harrison, a natural 145er. Definitely hard to get fights in the women's featherweight division. I would pay pay-per-view money to watch Kayla Harrison versus Amanda Nunes. Definitely not going to happen in the conceivable future,
Yeah.
but that is a fight that I would love to
Oh.
see.
You know who we're forgetting about that PFL just signed? Probably gonna fight Kayla Harrison next year. She's gonna get her ass whooped, but Clarissa Shields.
Clarissa Shields.
Is it 2 years from now or is it one?
Next year.
Next
This
year.
year, I guess. She's
This
gonna
year,
fight
2021.
she's probably
I
gonna fight
don't-
Kayla Harrison.
I don't care how much training she does at Jackson Wink. This is not happening.
She gonna die.
Happen.
We gonna see a girl die on live TV.
Yeah,
but,
we're gonna see
you
her
know.
get smoked. I'm all
James,
for
do you
it.
have a prospect fight of the year that you see breaking out big in 2021?
If I pronounce his name wrong, excuse me. Hakeem Dawado.
Yeah.
Dowd. Yeah,
Dowd,
Hakeem
yeah.
Dowd.
Yeah.
He's been my pick pretty pretty consistent. The last person he fought, I believe, actually came. I mean, I don't know if they trained with Khabib, but I know they were hype, right?
Yeah, he beat Zubi. He beat Zubaro.
Yeah, Zubaro.
Great
Exactly.
performance.
And I expected Zubaro to actually win, and then I think Hakeem came in, and Zubaro was overweight, and the way that Hakeem sat there, still traded, did what he needed to do, worked his game plan, like it was. I don't know, man. I'm liking it.
Yeah, Hakeem Dowd. That's a great pick for
Yeah.
the featherweight division. Definitely someone to keep their eye on.
Definitely. Okay, so now we're going.
I don't think I have anyone,
What?
to be honest with you.
How
Like
you not have anybody?
the only reason why I don't have anyone is because I'm gonna just be honest with you. I don't really pay attention to a lot of these rookies. I don't.
Would you call Kevin Holland a rookie?
Like, okay, that's a little bit of a loophole. Yeah, but he's no longer. I guess.
You know what's going to be fun to watch with rookies is Hooper. I want to see how long he can survive with just jiu-jitsu. I just want to see where the level is at, where it's like, all right, now I'm starting to get my ass kicked because I can't just knee bar people all the time.
Hey, look, I'm always with the specialists and seeing how far they can last. I absolutely love to see it.
But it's not a specialist sport.
I
That's
wouldn't
the
even
thing.
call Hooper a specialist, though. I mean, if you look at what Crone Gracie did to Bruce Leroy versus how Chase Hooper got his butt whipped by Bruce Leroy, I would be way more comfortable calling Crone Gracie a specialist than I would Chase Hooper. I think Chase Hooper got pushed a little too early. I don't want to hate on the kid. He is 2-1 in the UFC, both his wins coming by finish. So I don't want to go too heavy on the Chase Hooper sucks train. But if we're talking top prospects, I think there's so many guys that you can put before him. Hakeem Dawoodu in the same division as Chase Hooper would just beat the brakes off of Chase Hooper. If they
I just want to see how long he survives. It's gonna be curious to see. It's gonna be fun.
I want to see him fight Crone Gracie. I think Luke just made a fight.
No,
Chase
I
Hooper,
actually
Crone
love
Gracie.
what Chad says. I love what Chad says. I don't hate Chase Hooper by any sense of the word, but it is fun to see how a guy like that with only one tool. I am going to tune in to every single fight of his just to see how it happens. So how long will he last? Only time will tell.
Yep, that's true. That's true.
Uh,
So,
getting into specialist. Are we
Yep.
going to sub of the year?
Okay, so I'm gonna let you rock with that one.
Submission
Chad. I'm gonna go
of
ahead and let you
the
rock with that
year.
one.
Jimmy Crute and Mackenzie Dern kind of fall in the same category because they both landed a knee bar, and that's hard as fuck to do. So
Yes.
at that point, yeah. Can I put an asterisk in this? Like, can I put like a questionable? It wasn't really a submission, but it should have been a submission on 99.999% of human beings.
Uh-oh, here we
It's
go.
Charles Olivier.
Oh, no.
It's Tony Ferguson. Like, that would have been, hey, submission of the year for me, but Tony Ferguson is not all the way a human being, so
Yeah.
hey,
Yeah.
I
Let
agree
me
with
down.
that. If
I
we're going to
lost.
asterisk, that's my favorite one because I seen his arm come out of place. I was like, oh,
Yeah, that was nasty.
my gosh.
That was nasty. I don't know how he didn't have.
Yeah, I agree.
There's a lot this year, but I would say just those two with a knee bar and just knowing the difficulty of trying to of pulling that off in a UFC fight
Yeah.
makes all the difference, So
Yeah, live knee bar is not easy.
we'll see.
Okay. So I mean, well, you got me in your picks because I agree.
Yeah.
Brad, do you have a different pick?
My pick was actually I was with Khabib when he did the Mountain Triangle to Justin Gaethje.
Ah, that's interesting.
That's a pretty good one.
That's a good
Yeah.
one. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's surprising
Given Justin Gaethje's wrestling experience
that we've never really
I mean,
seen.
even though we've never seen it in UFC, but he's supposed to be a great wrestler, and Khabib make that look like light work. And then the guy just passed out. On top of that, it was very impactful
Yeah, it was.
in many ways, in more than one way.
Yeah,
So,
definitely.
I'm going
Okay,
with that.
I agree with that.
Yep.
I would agree with that. Okay.
So I actually go outside of the UFC for mine.
All right.
I give mine to AJ McKee over Darian Caldwell at Bellator 253. You guys probably saw the highlight where Caldwell shot in. McKee went over top of Caldwell's head,
Yep.
kind of like he's going for a guillotine, but then he went under the arm and hit a neck crank off of his back against Caldwell. And I have that done because of the severity of the fight. It was to get in the finals of the Grand Prix. Winners fighting the world champ. And two, Darian Caldwell is a savage wrestler. He has beat everybody in Bellator, not named Kyoji Horiguchi at 135.
Okay.
Going up to 35, he ran the bracket up until McKee.
Yeah,
At
first
the
fighter to
Grand
beat
Prix.
undefeated Adam
Yeah.
Bork, submitted him in the first round.
That's crazy.
Yeah, Caldwell is no joke, and he got submitted in the first round by AJ McKee.
So I also had AJ McKee versus Darian Caldwell with a move that he called the McKeotine. It was like a move that he made up.
The
Kind of came out of nowhere, but an amazing submission. I think
All right.
for skill, shout out to Jimmy Flick. He's in the UFC. I'm following him since he was in the regional circuit at LFA with his flying triangle over Cody Durden. And for moment, as far as like stakes, Aljamain Sterling versus Corey Sandhagen and the aforementioned Khabib Nurmagomedov over Justin Gaethje were right up there with my top picks.
Okay.
But if we're going for submission of the year solely based on skill or just the all-out beauty of the submission, by a narrow margin over my boy Jimmy Flick, I'm going to agree with Jason and say also my submission of the year is AJ McKee with the McKeotine over Darian Caldwell. Man, I've never seen anything like it, and to pull it off that decisively against a high level of competition on that stage, really remarkable. I mean, it's rare that you see a submission you've never seen before with MMA evolving at the pace it is. Like flying triangles, they're amazing, but I've seen it before. I've seen omoplatas, not many, but I've seen it before. For us to see something that we've never seen before can't be understated how impressive it is to see something like that pulled off at the highest level. And the intentionality of it too. It wasn't this weird position that he happened to catch in a scramble and could see that Caldwell was in pain and he decided to crank on it. I mean, this was systematically goes into the guard, sets up the submission, locks it in and squeezes with full intent and full technical strategic intentionality and gets the tap from a guy like Darian Caldwell. that's my submission of the year. My only pick outside the UFC, but definitely deserves to be up there at the top of the top.
I can see that happening too. If Cole was definitely more so of a wrestler instead, if,
Yeah.
I don't know if you did any wrestling, Luke, but Jason said he's done wrestling. I came from that background as well. That is nothing but just being aggressive. Forcing your
Yeah.
will on someone else, so and control. So that is still impressive. Not really crazy for me to not exactly see it. Well, in hindsight, me saying that now because we saw it before, it's like okay, and it makes sense. But
Yeah.
you're right, live, I didn't catch it live. Unfortunately, I caught it on YouTube, so I'm pretty sure live it was probably absolutely crazy. So yeah, no, okay, these some good picks. Now we're getting to the like the nitty gritty.
Yeah. What's that? Best fighter of the year for men?
Yes, sir.
Brad, why don't you go ahead and take that one?
Yeah, go ahead, Brad. Like you thinking?
Fighter of the year for men,
Yes.
Figueredo.
I'll take that as well. We've had this discussion already too. So
Yeah.
more so me and you definitely.
Like it's for me, it's just different because Jay and I actually went to his fight in Norfolk, Virginia before he went.
Oh, wow.
Crazy.
When he fought
Joseph Benavidez.
Benavidez, thank you. So we actually saw like the story,
The
if you will,
slaughter.
like when he was first rising up, and like from then on, we was just been paying attention to him.
That's amazing, Brad. What was his power like in person? Watching a flyweight hit that hard in
Yo.
person.
Well, see,
I heard it from my state. I heard it from.
it
my
was
seat.
nasty, but the thing is, he was also overweight during that fight.
He
So
was, but still, no.
I
I'm
mean,
not taking away from
regardless, it was
We heard
let's just say Benavidez.
We heard Benavidez get hit, and we heard how hard he hit.
You heard that pop throughout.
Yes.
That was wild.
Amazing.
Like, yeah.
Amazing experience. Very amazing experience. So,
Jason and Shad, do you guys have any disagreements with Figueiredo as the male fighter of the year?
Uh,
Yeah, I have somebody else.
ooh. That real quick.
Right.
we probably have the same one. I would.
Yeah, I think we do.
I would probably edge it with Kevin Holland.
Yep.
Not taking anything away from Figueiredo and then learning after the fight of why Figueiredo's performance probably wasn't what we expected in that last fight against Brandon Moreno, just going to the hospital. But
Twice.
I kind of don't really – I expect this from somebody like Davison Figueiredo who just cut so much weight to go so far down, which makes a massive difference. I got to give it to Kevin Holland. Because Kevin Holland just proved a lot to us. And I'll let you elaborate more on Kevin Holland. So for me, I won't even say Kevin Holland. I would have to say Jan Blachowicz.
That's a good pick. Yeah, that's a great pick. Super underappreciated.
I think Jan had a good run and proved, hey, I can hold this light heavyweight belt.
I'll see why you picked him, though. Because you hate Dominic Reyes. But
Yeah.
you hate Dominic Reyes.
I don't hate Dominic Reyes. I think Dominic Reyes got –
You definitely hate him. We had this discussion. You hate him.
Wow.
I don't Dominic Reyes at all. But
Okay.
anyway, continue on.
All right.
I would have to say Jan. I'd have to say Jan.
Okay.
Yeah, just to be different from Davison Figueiredo. But if I had to choose, like it's going to be Kevin Holland.
Okay. So
But I'm not gonna-
So we got.
I
two-
appreciate you putting Jan Blachowicz' name into the pot for fight of the year because he was a fighter who I heard other people talk about as fight of the year, guys like you, Chad. And I was like, wow, I didn't even think of him. I was thinking just Figueiredo and Holland. And even though I fell in one of those two, it is really crazy how underappreciated Blachowicz was taking the light heavyweight belt. Two amazing wins in 2020. Could definitely see that as a viable fighter of the year candidate, and no one's even talking about him. So I really appreciate you bringing that up.
There's a reason for that because it's hard to shine next to the star that is John Jones, who he was not beat for that belt. He let it.
Right.
Yes.
And so because of that, like it's like Jan, congratulations. It's like when Daniel Cormier got the belt.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's not legitimate until this guy gets beaten.
That's
Daniel
true.
Cormier, the
very
greatest
true.
second banana that we've
To
ever
ever
seen.
Jason, let me hear your defense of Kevin Holland because before I talk about who I picked for fight of the year, I want to hear what you have to say about why you pick Holland over the perennial favorite Davison Figueiredo.
So Pretty simple reasoning for me. 2 reasons. One, he fought more times. 2, he never missed weight. Davidson Figueiredo missed weight the first fight of the year. That's got to mean something. I'm tired of people just chalking that up. Oh, he won, and then he won the No, he missed weight. Like, he couldn't do his job. As a fighter, you have 2 jobs, fight and make weight. He could not do literally half of his job.
I agree.
Sorry. Hate to be a hater, but Kevin Holland, with what he did, breaking out this year, knocking out Jacare off of his back, knocking out Joaquin Buckley, coming out, just keeping everything as smooth as ice, and going for it, I got to go with Kevin Holland for male fighter.
That's fair.
That's very fair. Yeah.
That's fair.
I have no rebuttal to that.
I don't have no quarrels with that. All right,
I'm gonna go with Davison Figueiredo for a couple reasons, and Holland is right up there. It was a toss-up for me. Really could have gone either way.
3-2.
Holland had 5 wins on the year. Figueiredo only had 4 fights, and one of them was a draw. 2 reasons that I'll pick Figueiredo over Holland, even though Holland's a great choice. 1, the championship belt has to mean something. You know, he was crowned a champion. Jacare's a great win, but Davison Figueiredo all year was fighting the number 1 and the number 2 contenders. Another reason I'm going to go with Figueiredo over Holland is what Figueiredo gave to the flyweight division was monumental, bigger than just what Holland did for his own career.
Thank you for saying
Figueiredo may have very well saved the flyweight division with his fight of the year contender against Brandon Moreno, even though that was his only fight of the 4 that wasn't a win. That fight's impact not only on Figueiredo's career and stock as a fighter, but on the organization of the UFC of a whole is massive. If you remember back when they cut the lightweight division many years ago, it was off of a draw, and a champion wasn't crowned because of the draw, and it killed the entire lightweight division. Such a possibility of that also happening to a division like the flyweight division, whose life has been on the line for years. And Figueiredo just came through so big in that moment. I think that as a whole, Davison Figueiredo was my male fight of the year because he contributed so much, not only to his own stock as a fighter, but to the UFC at large. Figueiredo's impact was the biggest, not only of a male fighter, but of a female fighter as well. And that's why I have to go with the champ at 125 for my male fight of the year. Not only an amazing year, but a fight of the year contender and possibly saving the flyweight division. So I'm going to have to edge it out to Deus Figueiredo.
So you're telling me that a guy who is not a true flyweight had to come down and barely make flyweight to save flyweight?
Yeah, definitely missing weight is a stain on the pedigree or the resume rather this year, Figueiredo. You hate to see him miss weight. I agree with you and Jason. We can't just brush over that.
But even deeper than that, he almost didn't fight against Brandon Moreno because of that weight cut, which he got
almost, but he did fight against Figueiredo or Moreno, and it was an amazing fight. So don't want to break too much into the hypotheticals. It was an amazing fight, and I can totally see how Kevin Holland is your pick. I'm not going to argue that it's the wrong one. It could be either one. But like I said, the belt has to mean something, and the contribution that Figueiredo made to the flyweight division at large with his fight of the year contender against Moreno, I think really pushes him over the edge for who I would say was my male.
I just have mixed feelings about Figueiredo. That's all it is.
I know.
That's okay. Very fair.
That's okay. Yeah, me and Brad are stressed out about the division thing for a while now. I mean, outside of the podcast and stuff like that. That is big for me, without a doubt.
Yeah, I mean, like even if you look at like the Figueiredo fight, like every other fight before that, it was like a dominant performance. But when he fought Brandon Moreno, it was such a good fight. It was a war. So not only did Figueiredo basically prove that he can do something in that division, but also Brandon Moreno also proved that he can actually do something for that division as well.
Yeah.
So,
and that was my point about Kevin Holland too, is like the level of competition that you'd say Holland fought versus what Figueiredo fought, fighting Benavidez, Perez, and Brandon Moreno. I think on average was a little bit higher than the level of competition that Holland had to face over his 5 fights. I believe only one ranked fighter out of those 5 were, like I said, Figueiredo every single fighter that he fought this year, like Brad brought up, had either a number 1 or a number 2 next to his name.
Yep. I agree. All right. So now we go to the women.
Can I just make one caveat?
Oh, here we go. Come on.
Because I just it's weird for me to and I'm all about when you start to get into the safety of the sport too. But when you have a guy that we're saying we give him all these accolades and he's fighter of the year, which I'm not taking away from any of his talent. He's extremely talented and I love to watch him. But I think a guy that has to lose 39 pounds or makes a 39-pound weight cut is extremely dangerous. And I think that's just the wrong message for the sport. Because it's like, hey, you know, if I can manage to cut 30 pounds, and I'll put Max Holloway in that same category and put Darren Till in that same category of guys that are just cutting massive amounts of weight to drop down and fight smaller frame guys. And you see, yeah, I can cut that weight, but that power doesn't cannibalize itself that much, you know? And we see that. And I think Figueiredo is where we see that most evident is we've never seen somebody at that weight class punch like that.
Never.
Very true.
And then you hear like, oh yeah, hey, I cut 30 pounds to get here, and it's like, oh, okay, I get it now. So that's my only
to defend Figueiredo. DC cut a crap ton of weight, and his power did not transfer.
I was just about to say that. I was waiting for There's a few. Yeah. There's a few people that I think that cut a lot of weight and their power didn't transfer. So you know, he just may hit hard, super hard, outside the weight too. Some people just got that punching power.
You're right. Very true.
You're right, and it's definitely worse if you're higher weight. So I'm gonna definitely give you that. I'm not gonna discount that at all. Higher weight is definitely more power to it, but Figueiredo has that power. So
I think what he does is dangerous, and you know, but it works out for him.
Yeah,
so
Sport itself is dangerous. So
now, fight of the year. Women. Man, oh man.
I
have mine already.
You know what? I haven't tagged Luke to be the first one to say something in a while. Go ahead, Luke. Drop it.
Yeah. So this was a difficult one for me because my female fight of the year only fought once, and it's Zhang Weili, the strawweight champion, is my female fight of the year. Amanda Nunes only fought once, and an underappreciated fighter, Alimale McFarland in Bellator, might have been in that conversation too, had she not lost her most recent fight. And the only other high-profile women's champion that fought this year twice was Valentina Shevchenko. And no disrespect to either Jennifer Maia or Katlyn Chukagian, but just not nearly the level of competition that Joanna Jędrzejczyk was. I think that war and that title defense that Joanna Jędrzejczyk and Weili Zhang had was worth 2, if not 3, Jennifer Maia or Katlyn Chukagians. No disrespect to them. Okay. I just think with the pedigree that you compare JJ2 to really all of or most of the female strawweight division, she's the queen. I'm sorry, the flyweight division. No, yeah, strawweight division. I apologize. She bounces back and forth. Yeah. You know, I think that Weili Zhang contributed more to women's mixed martial arts with that one fight than Valentina Shevchenko did in 2. No disrespect to Felicia Spencer. Amanda Nunes had a great year, and you can put her in that conversation too. But after going back and forth in my own head, I think it's very fair to say that Zhang Weili was the female fighter of the year. Highest profile, highest stock raise, probably the best performance all in all.
I'm going to agree with you too, and also I like the fact that she's bringing like traditional martial arts back. I follow her closely as far as stuff like that too. And let's be real, traditional martial arts is definitely great, and it can work, but it's not a lot of times you see it work. Besides her and Khabib.
Isn't she the first Chinese UFC champion too?
Yes.
That too.
Yeah, shout out to Zhang Weili.
She's
Chinese champion.
She's made waves. So, Luke, I have absolutely no regrets in that pick. I'm with you all the way. I was a little weird because it was only one fight, but that was one of a top 3 fight that I've seen from women in general. Maybe a fight in general. So it's like
maybe fight in general.
So that's always my pick. So
I agree. That's my same pick for the most part.
That was my pick from the beginning. So
Oh man, am I the only one?
Oh, go
Jason,
ahead.
you have a different
Fuck.
fighter other than
course.
Zhang Wei Li as female fighter of the year?
Yes. I have Shevchenko just because she fought twice, and the skill gap between her and the entire rest of that division, with the exception of like 3 girls, is so damn high, and she maintains it. Once she starts to fight a few other girls in that division, I think Andrea KGB Lee is a pretty big dark horse for her. Once she starts to fight girls like that, she might experience problems, but she probably will, and she'll probably continue to basically be a real life Black Widow. She
But the
shoots
problem,
guns.
the problem with Valentina picking Valentina Shevchenko because of her skill disparity, there's two ways you can look at it. One, we say that because there's such a gap in the skill between her and the number one contenders, that is that speaks to her volume of skill. But she looked so mediocre against Jennifer Maya that you can't even give her what you'd normally give her as the accolade of being so far above the competition of women's skill. The other way you can look at it as she's fighting fighters who are kind of scrubs.
That's true, too.
And your argument sort of falls apart because you have to have one or the other. Now, if she would have blown Jennifer Maya out of the water, I could see Valentina as the fighter of the year, but she looked very lackluster. And I think the fact that, okay, maybe if she would have had 3 fights, we say you got to give the body of work to Valentina Shevchenko as fighter of the year. But with only one more fight than Zhang Wei Li's,
And then
I
there's
don't think that you can say the 2 fights that Valentina had add up to what the fight between JJ and Wei Li had on the impact of women's mixed martial arts at large. And I will disagree with you and say that your pick of Shevchenko as female fight of the year is almost as ridiculous as saying that Shogun Rua will fight for a world title.
I
before
knew
the
that
end
was
of the
coming
career.
back. I knew it was coming
All right,
back.
2 things. 2 things. 1, Luke, you like mint chocolate chip ice cream. You don't get to call anything ridiculous.
That is
2.
absolutely disgusting.
That's like even toothpaste. A little bit toothpaste. That's terrible.
Exactly. Now, 2, you can, if we can look at things 2 ways, let's look at things 2 ways. We can look at it as she had one more fight than Zhang Wei Li, or we can take the high road and look at it as she had literally double the amount of fights as Zhang Wei Li did this year. 2 is double 1. It works, math.
It works, man.
I was going somewhere with that, but I think the reason she looked like crap against Jennifer Maya is the same reason John Jones looked like crap against Dominic Reyes, man. I think she's just getting bitter beating all these chicks up. She needs a challenge. She needs the Nunes trilogy.
But that's
she
hypothetical,
arguably beat
though.
Nunes. Huh?
But that's hypothetical, though. Just like John Jones thing. It's hypothetical.
Yeah. The John Jones thing wasn't hypothetical. Him and his team all came out and said, "Yeah, I'm bored." That was like real.
Listen, and we know that's real because John Jones gets real bored real easy. Okay.
Yeah, they took him off coach. Like,
Yeah.
Oh my God, Jason, you went
That's
there.
true.
Listen,
And Coke
listen,
is
Coke
fun.
Boy Jones is a staple of this.
Hashtag it.
Okay,
Coke Boy
So-
Jones.
you can never get away from them.
All right, some hot takes. I really thought this would be our first unanimous category. I thought all of us would have Zhang Wei Li. Jason spoiling the party.
Yeah,
But okay, I'm glad to have the diversity of opinion. I can't say Valentina's a bad choice. She did fight twice this year, but I just think so clearly the female fighter of the year was the one who had the biggest impact on the sport on the women's side. And I really think you're crazy if you pick anyone other than Zhang Wei Li. But
Yeah.
okay, fair play to you. She
Yeah.
did have more.
Matt
I would
is
depends on
right.
what part of the world we're into with that. Just us being in the West, those are the 2 names that are really standing out to us. But if I had to go to like one championship, I'd say Stamp Fairtex.
that's a pretty solid choice.
Yeah. So I think Stamp Fairtex is showing how dominant she could be. Now,
Yes.
rough on Muay Thai side lately. She's had some rough outings, Muay Thai. But MMA,
Right.
I think her Muay Thai skill translates a lot better in MMA.
That's fair.
And I think
Yep.
she's starting to show it.
And I think Angela Lee would also be a pretty solid choice.
Yeah.
At a one championship.
Yeah.
Okay. See, I don't watch one as much.
Fight
Maybe I need to start paying attention
Of
to
the
that.
year.
Oh, boy, it's got good fights, man.
Oh,
Why
there
not
were some
catch
great
that
fights
catch?
this year.
great fights in one.
James, do you want to go first on this one? What was your fight of the year, bro?
There was so much. There was.
I wasn't gonna say anything.
Me and you had discussion, Luke. Right? We had discussion, and I agree with what you said. No, actually, you know what? That was a second. I want to go Dustin versus. I'm gonna go Dustin versus
Dan Hooker.
maybe Dan Hooker. I'm trying to think if I.
Justin Dan Hooker.
I'm thinking about Dustin Dan. Yeah, that was a pretty good one. That was a slugfest. That was a slugfest. I
was a good fight.
I enjoyed
Take
that.
I'm gonna take that. I'm gonna throw it in the trash. And
Oh.
too.
I never heard that, but okay.
Oh, what? Hold on. Was that not a slugfest?
It was, but you're talking about fight of the year. He just named the girl who was the female fighter of the year. Did you not? Did you not remember her fight?
I understand that, but I just don't want to do the same thing over again. We overlap with Kevin. I just don't want to overlap again. That's
So
really
we
what
look.
I'm avoiding.
It's a
Respect.
weird.
Respect to Zhang Wei Li versus Yuan Yu's J-Check. Respect to Figueiredo versus Moreno.
That is.
My fight of the year is Poirier versus Hooker. I think that more damage was done in that fight. And there was a greater display of mixed martial arts skill. There were no takedowns or submission attempts in the JJ fight. There were no submission attempts in the Moreno versus Figueiredo fight. But we got to see a good display of takedowns, takedown defense, guillotines, triangles, and a really good display of cage work on the fence. Poirier having to work off his back to the fence on multiple occasions. I think it was a wider range of skills on display, and I think that the damage was so much more impactful in the Hooker fight than the JJ or the Figueiredo Moreno fight. I've heard a lot of people go back and forth on this, and all three of them are good picks. But I just have to go with Poirier versus Hooker. Recently, leading up to this recap, I rewatched all three of those fights. And I remember at the time, the fight that I was most excited watching live was JJ versus Wei Li.
Right.
By a close
without
margin.
doubt.
But going back and looking back on them objectively, obviously the recency bias of Figueiredo versus Moreno was big on my mind. Rewatching all three fights, I believe that from a technical and entertainment standpoint, the best fight of the year was Dustin Poirier versus Dan Hooker. And I'm interested in what you four guys have to say and what you think is the best pick.
Also,
I would say, go ahead, James.
Oh, I'm about to say also just to tag up on that too, and I'll be just done with it. Also, at the same time, when JJ and Staley fought, like I thought that after a while, if you got the lump on the head, it became kind of one sided. After a while, it's like Whaley was walking into stuff. She's walking through stuff. So that's why I eliminated from that. Davison, the Davison Figueiredo fight, that we knew what happened around that. How he was like, had to go to the hospital and stuff like that. So when I go back and look at it and review both them as well as like Luke, Poirier and Dustin fight was, Hooker, I'm sorry. Hooker was absolutely stunning. I think I liked it, and it was like, and to me, that was a constant. I don't know who's going to win 100%.
The entire fight.
The whole entire fight. I could not miss anything. So I'm gonna just let that lay the rest since, I had to cut off Chad because he wanted to throw my pick in the trash. So I'm gonna go back in there, and
I would. The reason why I give it to JJ and the Wei Li fight is knowing their backgrounds, like knowing JJ's background and say, hey, I'm gonna strike with you for 5 rounds. We're gonna go to war, and I'm not afraid of you. I'm not afraid of you. I'm not afraid of how you strike. I'm not afraid of your background. I know you're one of the best women's kickboxers that's ever walked this planet. And she put on a clinic, and Wei Li put on a clinic.
She did.
You have to give it there, and then you also have to give it to Joanna, who took a lot of damage in that fight and said, hey, I'm just as scary. It's not all bark for me.
And she stood in there too. She traded back. She traded back. Like, she's just not as strong as Wei Li. But
and I think that fight and what it did for women's MMA, of just letting everybody know, like, hey, we're serious about this. We can strike just as performative to the same levels as a lot of men do. The strength may not be there, but they showed that technically they are on par.
That's fair.
I got to give it to Wei Li and JJ.
That's fair.
Yep, that's fair.
That's fair. All right, so we got 2, 3 picks.
Brad, you want to go? You want me to go?
Oh, my answer was the same as Chad. So
Whaley,
Oh,
JJ.
okay.
Okay.
Oh, so
So
we
I
got
was
2 for Hooker
between-
Poirier. We got 2 for Zhang and JJ.
Yep.
Jason, you're the tiebreaker.
You are the
Don't let me
tiebreaker.
down.
You got a time.
So mine, I'm between 2. One of them is Poirier Hooker,
Okay.
and none of them has not been mentioned yet. It was Hooker Felder.
That was a
It's a great
If you
fight.
remember,
That was an
man.
average
thinking
dragon.
back before Corona, in a weird time known as February, the
Jason?
same night, Deontay Wilder fought Tyson Fury the second time. Paul Felder got retired
dang.
by Dan Hooker. It was a very close decision. I had
Robbery.
Hooker winning the fight.
Robbery.
I don't know if it was a robbery, man.
wouldn't
It
say
was
robbery
razor
either.
close.
That was close. That was a
It was in New Zealand, so you could say that there was hometown bias there. And maybe that's why I kind of leaned to Poirier Hooker because it was a cleaner win.
It
But
was.
man, if that wasn't a great fight.
It was.
It was. That was an amazing fight.
That was actually Chael Sonnen's pick for fight of the year was Felder versus Hooker.
Really?
Um,
Okay.
Was it really?
Yeah, I think elevated above that though was Hooker Poirier or JJ versus Zhang Weili. And
Yeah.
leading up to this podcast, I flip flopped a lot on fight of the year. It really could have been either
As
of
did
those
I.
two. I think I agree with Chad that at large, the JJ versus Weili fight had a bigger impact on the sport of mixed martial arts
It did.
simply because
Yes.
of the way it elevated the women's game to such a public eye. I mean, that was the Adesanya versus Romero pay-per-view. So it was on a big stage. There were still crowds, big live audience, large pay-per-view buys. And I think that fight, again, really showed that women's mixed martial arts is rising to the level of men's mixed martial arts, even though the sport hasn't been around as long on that side. Out of pure entertainment value, though, I think I lean towards Poirier Hooker because there was a little bit more damage on display and there was a little bit more variety of things going on. Poirier jumped a couple guillotines, threw up a couple triangles.
Couple. Jesus, he jumped a guillotine every 5 minutes.
Not to mention,
Oh.
didn't that fight lead up to him fighting Khabib as well? Was that the implications behind that?
No, that was right after.
That's
That
right
was
after?
Poirier's
Okay.
fight after,
Maybe,
Khabib,
okay.
I believe.
Can I add something that just popped up on my phone?
Sure.
Because Dan Hooker's performance against Poirier, Dan
confirmed.
Hooker, Michael Chandler.
It's confirmed. We've already we already knew this. At least
Yeah.
And
Wait,
Poirier
is that
versus
confirmed?
McGregor. You know,
No,
they're
it's
going on the
confirmed.
big
Confirmed.
thing.
That is
Really?
my
What did they say?
No, that's 257.
Nice.
That's on the 257 card.
257.
That's
Bring
nice.
up my
Dope.
live, y'all. We bring it
Ooh.
live. Okay.
That's dope.
Yeah, I'm with
Yeah.
that.
Michael Chandler's going to get exposed. You heard it here first.
Whoa,
Yeah.
I somewhat agree. I
So you-
agree.
Yeah. So you have Dustin Connor as the main, and then you have Dan Hooker, Michael Chandler.
Ooh,
That's hilarious.
that's a
Michael
Michael
great-
Chandler's so overrated. I'm sorry. You know.
I like him though. I like him.
I love Michael Chandler. Michael Chandler's awesome. He's a good fighter and he's a great human being, but he's so overrated. He wasn't the Bellator champ when he left. He won't be the UFC champ now that he's here. Dan
Yeah.
Hooker's going to finish him.
I think that Missouri squad's cursed now. I think that whole Missouri, Ben Askren, Tyron Woodley,
Yeah.
That whole
Now
batch,
Michael
they done.
It
Chandler.
could be.
I think all of them are done.
Yeah, they all done in my opinion as well. That's
Oh,
a
man.
wrap. That's a
That's
wrap.
sad. That is
Ben
sad.
Askren, he's about to fight Jake Paul, the most
Oh
talked
my
about boxer ever,
gosh.
right?
I don't even want to talk about Jake Paul anymore.
Ah,
Jake Paul.
Yeah, we won't get into that. That's
Jake
just
Paul.
disappointing.
okay.
So disappointed. Jason automatically gave it up. Okay.
We talked about that
No,
last.
I'm cool with that. Yeah.
Yeah, that was last episode
Talk
anyway.
about
Yeah.
it. I was
I'm
very
done with that.
excited to talk about Jake Paul.
Okay. So I guess as far as bold predictions, anything crazy?
Matt Semmelsberger will be the breakout fight of the year in 2021. Jason, shame on me for not picking him as a breakout fighter when we talked about it earlier. You reminded me of it, but I was sort of thinking about mentioning it at the end of the show. Matt Semmelsberger, UFC welterweight, currently 1-0 in the UFC. That is my bold prediction for 2021.
I like it.
And I've had no indication that she's going to fight. So I won't say this is a bold prediction, only keep an eye out for Tatiana Suarez. She's gone through a lot of injuries and obviously her battle with cancer. But in my opinion, she is currently the best 115 women's fighter on the planet right now. Better than Zhang Wei Li, better than Rose Namajunas, better than Joanna Jędrzejczyk. Tatiana Suarez, I think, is the most skilled, the most well-rounded fighter in the female strawweight division, and I can't wait to watch her fight again. Shout out to powerful Tatiana Suarez. That's all I got for my wrap-up of 2020. Looking on to 2021.
All right. Okay. Jason.
I'm about to be extremely biased because it's kind of my thing. So my third prediction for 2021, Josh Jackson will make his Contender Series debut, win in the second round by TKO regardless of who it's against, and then fight at least once in the UFC before the end of the year.
How you take my prediction? I was like, Josh is going to make it to the UFC ranks. I was going to say that. All right, now I got to switch. Give me some time. Which one do you want to go? Chad, Brad, it's up to y'all. Give me some time.
I'll take it.
All right.
I kind of have two. Yeah.
Okay.
Connor gets the belt versus Poirier because that's going to happen.
Okay.
Connor gets his title defense against Khabib and wins.
No.
He said bold here.
It's a bold prediction.
Oh my god.
That is a bold prediction.
Chad.
I don't know if it's as bold as saying Charles Oliveira was the breakout fight of the year, but it's pretty bold. It's pretty bold.
That's my co-host, though.
Hey, I'm telling you, bro.
Yeah.
He's going to get a defense, and it's going to be against Khabib.
I like it.
Wait. Are you saying he's going to fight Khabib the second time, or he's going to beat Khabib?
Beat Khabib a second. He's going to beat him.
Oh.
Going to beat Khabib.
I didn't know we were allowed to do drugs before the podcast. My bad, guys. Shit.
All right,
He's going to beat him.
That, I mean, I didn't have the Khabib one, but the Dustin one. But I have it that Connor's going to win second round by knockout.
That's your big prediction? Big prediction?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and go a circle and go into an obvious answer since Jason wanna just screw up my whole when I was
You should have seen that coming though.
I should have. You've been rooting for the homers for a while now. I'm like, man, Josh hasn't slid in this conversation yet. I know he's coming somewhere in the course at the end.
Should have seen it coming.
Yeah, I should have seen it coming. See, I think I'm gonna go. I think this year, maybe not that much of a bold prediction, but Izzy takes his first L. Either by someone moving to Kevin, even between him playing with the different weight classes and stuff like that, I think that may play a role in.
That was going to be my second one. Same scenario. Kevin Holland will have a belt in 2021, and he will get his title defensive win against Izzy.
I could see Izzy fighting someone like fighting Jan, and while maybe possibly winning that, Jan seems like he doesn't leave out a fight without imposing some type of damage, and Izzy may go back down to his weight class and figure out that he's got a little bit more on his hands than what he used to have. So I absolutely agree with that. And even if then there's another angle about it, if he fights John Jones, I'm sorry, I like Izzy, but I'm telling you right now, Izzy, if you ever listen to this, if this ever get out, and for the record, John Jones comes down, he's coming down for blood.
So we're giving two.
I mean, I kind of went on the
I have a second one.
All right, go ahead and tell your second one.
My second one is TJ Dillashaw's gonna get exposed.
Oh, that's a good prediction. TJ Dillashaw, unsuccessful UFC return. That's a bold prediction. Prediction.
No EPO in the system?
He's gonna get exposed.
That's fair.
If I can do a second one, it'll be Ryan Hall gets pissed off with the UFC and goes and wins the Bellator title.
Yeah.
Hey.
That's not really that bold though, because I think
that's not that bold. I think a more bold prediction is Ryan Hall gets a fight and wins the UFC featherweight title.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, we got to get him a fight first. That's the problem.
That's the problem. That's why it's so bold. That's why it's so bold.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
I think with Ryan that a lot of managers have a lot to do with why he doesn't get fights, because there's a possibility that if you fight Ryan Hall, I may put your career on hold.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
That's true. That's true. So, okay. Wow. This was an interesting wrap up. Especially about bold predictions.
Look here, Connor is going to have a belt, and he will defend it this year.
That's bold.
He doesn't have a choice.
Yeah.
He does have a choice.
They always talk about Connor and these lack of title defenses. He does not have a choice now.
And I know he hears it too. So it's something you got to face. The writing's on the wall. You got to face it. So I agree. All right, guys. Well, you know, like I said, this was great. Luke, Jason, thank you for hopping on a Puncher's Chance.
Thanks for inviting us, man.
Thank you very much for the hospitality.
Hope to see you all soon. Everyone enjoy their weekend. Happy 2020. And we're out.